A while ago, I published a video called Nationalism Reconsidered, in which I spoke of the decline of nationalism in the age of multiculturalism, and the bad repercussions that it brought. I suggested that the bad reputation nationalism has is due to the bad forms that it took at the beginning of the 20th century, and argued that there is a better type of nationalism, a liberal type, that today's countries should adopt. I've since learned that what I was arguing for is basically what is known as civic nationalism, a term I was unfamiliar with at the time. There are other voices out there calling for the adoption of civic nationalism and denigrating multiculturalism, which means that today's video is going to take the flip side and defend multiculturalism. I'm going to argue that the bad reputation multiculturalism is beginning to garner is due to its current regressive manifestations, and that there is another type of multiculturalism, a liberal type, which is perfectly in line with civic nationalism. Actually, I'm going to claim that this is what multiculturalism originally was about, before it got twisted by the regressive left. So how did the idea of multiculturalism emerge? Well, it was very much a reaction to the problems created by the nationalist approach of treating society as a melting pot. The modern state attempted to overcome the tribalism of the past, to create a cohesive society. The Enlightenment thinkers claimed that every human is a unique individual, but also that there are some traits that are universal and shared by all humans. The goal of the modern enlightened state was to create a society based on these universal traits, which will also allow freedom for every individual to express their uniqueness. As we've shown in our video about nationalism, this then took a bad turn as every nation thought that its values alone represented universal humanity, and should therefore be imposed on other nations. Following the two world wars that resulted from this attitude, the idea of nationalism lost its glamour. But not only nationalism. We have also started to think again about the Enlightenment idea that every individual has a unique side and a universal side, and realize that neither is true. Every one of our traits is shared with some people, and none of them are shared with all people. What makes an individual unique is not that they have some unique trait that no one else has, but that they constitute a unique mix of traits. So the ideal human existence is actually in communities, which allow us to commune with people that share one of our traits and develop a culture around it. An enlightened society should therefore aspire to allow every individual to explore all of their different traits, to form as many communities as they want with whomever they want, and simply be the supervising force that allows all of these different communities to coexist. This is what multiculturalism is about. So the idea of multiculturalism is to allow every culture to exist and flourish, and live peacefully among other cultures. And the state's job is to be the overseer that will ensure a smooth coexistence. For the regressive left, that means that the state should be devoid of any cultural identity itself, and we should therefore purify it from any remnants of national identity. The regressives are also excited by the idea that demographic changes will erase the majority that the main ethnicity of the nation currently holds, because they believe that this will hasten the realization of this ideal of a state without identity. As a German politician recently stated,
Frau Präsidentin, meine Damen und Herren, unsere Gesellschaft wird sich ändern. Unsere Stadt wird sich radikal verändern. Ich bin der Auffassung, dass wir in 20, 30 Jahren gar keine ethnischen Mehrheiten mehr haben in unserer Stadt. Das ist auch das, was Migrationsforscherinnen und Forscher sagen. Wir werden in einer Stadt leben, in der es einfach, dass unsere Stadt davon lebt, dass wir ganz viele verschiedene Ethnien haben, ganz viele Menschen, dass wir eine superkulturelle Gesellschaft haben, meine Damen und Herren. Das ist das, was wir haben werden in der Zukunft. Und ich sage Ihnen noch ganz deutlich, gerade hier in Richtung rechts, das ist gut so.
But in their zeal to achieve this ideal, the regressives are forgetting one little thing. The ideal, as we recall, is to create a society in which every culture can coexist, because it is wrong to deny cultures from existing and prospering. And the thing that they are forgetting is that some cultures are national cultures. And national cultures have just the same right to exist as any other culture. A national culture is a culture that is usually based on some ethnic culture, which became sovereign over a patch of land and formed a country. It then had to deal with all the problems of maintaining a sovereign country, such as developing tolerant views towards the minority ethnic groups within the country. In the process, these national cultures developed national cultural artifacts, such as philosophy, art and politics, artifacts that make no sense unless they belong to a culture that is sovereign in its country. In other words, the spirit of these cultures is a national spirit, and if you eliminate this part of them, you will severely maim them. The German culture will become hollowed out if it is no longer the national culture of a German country, and the same goes for the Russian, Mexican and Chinese cultures, and any other national culture. So the regressive left's wish to purify the state from its national identity and to deny the national culture its right to exist stands in direct contradiction with the idea of multiculturalism. So how do we balance between having a national culture and other cultures? Well, it's actually pretty easy, based on some rudimentary principles. We should give the members of every culture as much freedom as possible to live by their culture's own rules as long as they are dealing with each other. But when they are dealing with other people, or with the state, it should be done by following the rules and values of the national culture. Every culture should thus be expected to make itself compatible with the values of the national culture, to teach its members that they should follow its rules. If a culture doesn't comply with this principle, it has no place within the multicultural landscape. It must be forced to comply, to protect the right of the other cultures to exist. So when we pressure such cultures to change and conform, it is not against the ideal of multiculturalism, but actually in accordance with it. The right path, then, is the middle path between the idea of the melting pot, which means that all cultures are mashed into one national porridge, and the idea of the cultural stew, where the cultures just coexist in a formless mess. An enlightened state should look like a mosaic, in which every culture is allowed to maintain its unique color, but they all must fit into the patterns of the national mosaic. Every nation has its own unique pattern, a pattern that was created during its history, and every culture must find a way to fit into that pattern. Now, with most cultures, there is no problem. Most cultures are just formed around people's shared interests and passions, and exist comfortably within the national culture. Many youth cultures are rebellious cultures, which subvert the traditions of the nation, but Western cultures have already learned that eventually these cultures get assimilated into the national mosaic, and add more variety to it. So the rebellion is tolerated and accepted. The problem is mainly with cultures that adhere to a higher authority than the state, specifically religious cultures. In this case, these cultures are demanded to make the distinction between someone's private life, where they can obey the higher authority, and their relationship with the state or with people outside of their culture, where they must accept the authority of the state and the values of the national culture. Another question is what to do with the national cultures of immigrants from another country. But again, that is not much of a problem. If you migrate to another country, you can maintain your former national culture as an ethnic identity, but accept that your national identity is now determined by your new home. Multiculturalism works. Most people already understand and operate by the principles I've outlined, and multiculturalism has done fine for decades. All Western cultures today are rich mosaics of many cultures that coexist peacefully and prosperously. The bad name that multiculturalism has now is due to only two groups. One is Muslim immigrants, many of whom refuse to accept these principles, and the other is the regressive left, which placates them by twisting the basic tenets of multiculturalism. The answer to that is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and give up on multiculturalism altogether. The answer is to go back to the liberal version of multiculturalism and use it to demand of the Muslims to conform to it. This is the enlightened way, the Western way. This is the route we should be taking.